Look, it turned out I was right. I've been wrong plenty of times in my life. The Fed was wrong. They made a big mistake.
Serious effects. Now, in 2021, you were on, I think, Squawk Box. What was the term that you used for the monetary policy? Because we had SPACs, we had NFTs, we had the AMC apes, we had Bitcoin and Dogecoin, and yet the Fed still didn't see a problem.
Yeah, I think I said it was the most radical monetary policy relative to the circumstances in history. Look, I made a New Year's resolution that year not to be on TV, but when I saw what was going on, I couldn't control myself. I haven't been on TV since. Apparently this isn't on TV, that's a good thing. But I was just incredibly frustrated with what to me looked like a Fed that was just taking unbelievable risks. For what? The story at the time was inflation was 1.7, and we were buying 120 billion bonds a month. This was post-vaccine, successful vaccine, because inflation was 1.7 instead of 2. So we're taking this massive gamble where you threaten 40 years of credibility with inflation, and you're blowing up the wildest raging asset bubble I've ever seen. And I knew that the worst economies happen post-asset bubbles. The 30s here, post-89 in Japan, after the housing bubble blew up here. So that's what I went on. If you remember, the Fed did $2 trillion in QE after vaccine confirmation, and after the time I went on, you had the strongest momentum in employment in history on a rate of change basis. At the same time, their partner in crime, the administration, was doing more fiscal stimulus, again, post-vaccine, after it was clear emergency measures weren't needed, than we did in the entire great financial crisis. I'm not talking about before the vaccine. Look, it turned out I was right. I've been wrong plenty of times in my life. The Fed was wrong. They made a big mistake. It's not so much that they were wrong. I've been wrong a lot. It's the risk-reward bet they made. There's some news this morning in England. 30 years ago, we shorted the pound in the quantum fund. I didn't know whether the pound was going to devalue. What I did know was if they didn't devalue in the next 6 months, my fund was going to lose 50 basis points. If they did devalue, I was going to make 2,000 basis points. So it was a 40-to-1 one-way risk-reward bet. If you look at what the Fed did, the radical gamble they took to get inflation up 30 basis points from 1.7 to 2, it's to me sort of a risk-reward bet. You bet one to lose 40, and they lost. And who really lost? Poor people in the United States ravaged by inflation, the middle class, and my guess is the US economy for years to come, because of the extent of the asset bubble in time and duration and breadth that went on.
So they have that dual mandate. So you think that in the back of Jay Powell's mind, he was like, I got 30 basis points to go to get where I want to go? Or was he just saying, I don't see a problem yet, I want full employment, so I'm gonna let it ride at that point? Because the problem I have is that there's inflation and there's asset inflation. Was it not clear at that point that even if you weren't at 2%, there was asset inflation everywhere? Now, how does a guy that's running the Fed why is that not on his radar screen?
Because it's not part of their mandate, in their opinion, and I don't think they looked at it as a risk. And to be fair to him, we'd had 20 years of disinflation. People tend to live in the past, and he had plenty of company, including on your network. So the other thing I'll say is I've been wrong a lot in my career, and when I do, I correct my mistake. what was particularly mind-boggling to me, 2 to 3 months later, inflation takes off. It's no longer a theory. It's actually happening. We come up with this ridiculous theory of transitory. I mean, so we have $5 trillion in fiscal stimulus. We have $5 trillion in QE. Janet Yellen is running down the TGA account, so that's another trillion in stimulus. And if you remember the monetary framework in the fall of 2020, they were no longer going to forecast. They were going to be data dependent and wait till they see the whites of inflation's eyes. So guess what? They saw the whites of their eyes, and what did they do? They forecast that it was going to be transitory. When you make a mistake, you got to admit you're wrong and move on. That 9 or 10 months that they just sat there and bought 120 billion in bonds, I think the repercussions of that are going to be with us for a long, long time.
So they're going to whether they partners in crime with fiscal spending as well? And is that what caused, I mean, inflation is everywhere. And we know about Putin price hike, and we know about supply chain issues following the reopening. But is it really the growth in the money supply and the deficit that is the root cause of what we're seeing right now?
That's what lit the match, absolutely. I mean, come on. When I'm on TV, I wouldn't consider this one of my better calls. You got massive fiscal stimulus, you have massive monetary stimulus, and the thing is already starting to percolate, and of course it's what caused it. What I will say, there's a lot of people out there saying, well, Putin caused it. Putin did extend it, all right? But can I remind everybody that when Putin invaded, the CPI was 7% year to year before he invaded, and all this crazy stuff we did was to get inflation from 1.7 to 2, and
right.
We were already at 7. But yeah, once you light the match, and we found this out in the 70s, inflation rotates. That summer, everybody kept talking about used car prices are going to come down, this is going to come down. That's not the way it works. And by the way, there are a lot of disinflationary things happening now in the goods sectors. But so the UK unions, okay, do you think they're going to come in the spring and they're going to negotiate and they're going to say, oh, well, the five-year forward is 2.3, so yeah, I'll take a 2.3 raise.
Right.
No, it's like the railroad workers. They just got 24% over 3 years. When you lose that much purchasing power, so then the wage negotiations, it seeps in there. Then, of course, there's customers of companies that have to raise their wages, and the thing spirals. And that's what we're dealing with, and that's the position the Fed's got themselves in with basically a boom-bust policy. But yeah, they were not alone. The fiscal stimulus was a huge part of this, but to be fair, they enabled it. The government can't spend $5 trillion if they don't print it.
Yeah.